Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. I'm not satisfied when I learn something new unless I share it forward. And so we created this podcast to continue that, to share forward the wonderful people we get to meet and most importantly get to learn from and make our lives richer and better. Together we'll cover the human experience. And for me, the human experience is foundational in the idea of relationships. The topics will be far-reaching, but the common element you'll see here is it's all about relationships. So I invite you to join us on this journey. Come experience it with us, share your thoughts and ideas, and become part of our community. We'd love to have you.
The war in Ukraine is the largest ground conflict in Europe since the end of World War II. Millions of people have been displaced, their lives dramatically changed, and the death toll is rising daily. Despite this, the bravery of the Ukrainian people in the face of insurmountable odds has inspired the world. Humanitarian and military aid from the international community has been able to make a difference in the lives of refugees, soldiers, and civilians still left in Ukraine. John Corrigan knows firsthand the impact that an individual can have in a crisis. John is an entrepreneur at the intersection of business, technology, and politics, currently leading 7 Letter Labs. This past spring, John flew to Poland with his friends and his Ukrainian girlfriend to help aid the refugee crisis hands-on. John shares it forward by telling his true story here on Celebrations Chatter.
Let's get started. John Corrigan is a new friend the last 3 years. I think, John, we met at a Techonomy retreat, and between sessions, you came up and introduced yourself because of the Marist connection.
Correct.
Although you're a Chicagoan, you went to Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York, and that's a somewhat of a family college for my family. In fact, my brother's still on the board there. I believe he's the vice chairman there, and half of my kids have gone there. So it's a great place, and you had a good experience there, no?
I did. Funny enough, I went to Marist High School in Chicago.
Oh, that was a connection, yeah.
And I actually visited Marist High School in Chicago for the first time in 20 years last week. And and then I went to Marist College and I rowed crew. So for a kid from the south side of Chicago, rowing crew at Marist College was a bit of a departure from normal activities. But yeah, it was a great experience. I made lifelong friends, and I learned a great deal.
It's just a wonderful small size school. So, John, since Marist College, you've been doing a bunch of different things. It seems to me that what you do has always been about the intersection of marketing, technology, politics, social change. You told me a story of how you spent your spring vacation.
Yeah.
Blew me away. And you told me you met this gal and you built a relationship, and she's pretty darn special. And she's from Ukraine.
She is from Ukraine. So she is from the Donbass, and so she's from the town of Lugansk. She has been, so that's in the eastern part of Ukraine. It's east of Kyiv by about 10 hours if you're driving. So not far from the Russian border. And she has been in the United States since 2005. She's a lawyer. She does international arbitration for a firm called Curtis Millay. And so she's an American citizen at this point. She, like many other New Yorkers, myself included, moved to South Florida for the winter of 2020. And we met for lunch at in Miami and just hit it off from there. So we spent 6 months dating. And at the time, I was building a Ford Transit van into like a camper. I decided that van life was for me after selling my company, to be cliched about it. And so my friend and I built this van. I said to her, she's not, corporate lawyer, doesn't really camp. I was like, hey, do you want to tour America and live in this van with me for 6 months? She's like, you're out of your mind. But I'll come try it for 2 weeks. And so she liked it. So we did 19 states across the American West, about 17,000 miles at 11 national parks, saw copious amounts of friends, got to really in like the nitty gritty of American small towns. And, I'm an avid traveler and I've been a lot of places, but I don't think I truly understood the complexities and the depth of America and the people in it until I did this trip. And I would say also, like, I don't I still don't. I think we just scratched the surface. And it was interesting. Like she's an immigrant to America, right? And she loves America. And she's like, this is my home country now, and this is where I have chosen to live. And so getting to see it from her perspective was really interesting.
But she still has folks in Ukraine.
Well,
And
so
how did this spring break trip come up? Now,
yeah, so
most young people are going to go down to Florida or the Texas or one of the Caribbean islands for their spring break. How did you spend your spring break?
yeah, so we spent 35 days in Ukraine during the outbreak of a war.
All right, back it up.
Yeah.
How does this come about?
Yeah, so her family, her father and mother, their town was attacked in 2014, and they were able to get to the United States. Her two sisters are one's a refugee in Russia from the 2014 invasion, and the other is in the Lugansk area. And so she, obviously being from Ukraine, had gone to college in Kiev, had a lot of friends that lived there. And so when the war broke out, her friends of hers were contacting her, being like, "Hey, is there any way that you can help me get out of Kiev? We're under attack." And one of my dear friends is someone who works in conflict areas and with entrepreneurs. And so he had on day 2 of the war, this kid Jesse Levin had flown to Poland and then snuck into Ukraine and was in town in Western Ukraine called Lviv. So I called him and I said, "I know you're up to something." And he said, "Yeah, I was about to call you and see if you could help me." And I was like, "Of course." And I said, "Do you know anybody who, is driving, like picking up refugees and delivering them to safety?" And he said, "Funny enough, I met this kid at a bar. He's really tall. He's half Ukrainian, half Polish. His name's Nikolai. I'll connect you guys on WhatsApp and maybe he can help you." So I get connected to this kid Nikolai on WhatsApp, and
How old is Nikolai?
Nikolai is 23. So I called this kid, like, out of the blue.
Now you call him out of the blue. He doesn't
Yeah.
know you.
Doesn't know me. It's like, "Hey, I heard you're friends with my buddy Jesse." He's like, "Oh yeah, I've met Jesse. Good guy." I'm like, "I heard you're driving in Ukraine, delivering aid and picking people up and delivering them to safety." I said, "Would you be willing to go pick up 2 of my girlfriend's friends?" And he's like, "Yeah, no problem. Like, just text me a picture of them, text me an address." I'm like, "You do realize that you're going to do this at great risk to your own life?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I've already passed that. Like, let's get to the business of getting."
He's already been doing this for a couple of weeks at least at this point.
No, this was like day 5 of the war, right? So like he just kind of like what we discovered is that in Eastern Poland, they and a few other people were like, "This is going to happen, so we need to get ready for this." So he went and picked these people up, these friends of my girlfriend.
And they were in Kiev or
They were in Kiev. One he met, she was able to take the train out of Kiev, and the other he went and picked up.
how long
And
a trip was that for him from Poland?
the first trip was like 6 hours, 6 or 8 hours round trip. The second trip was longer, it's probably like 10 hours. But he kept us up to date the whole way, right? And we were leaving voice memos on WhatsApp, and we were doing some Google routing to see what roads and where we could find, with open source information, find Russian troop movements. Or he gets these 2 people to safety, and I say, "Hey, listen, like, what do I owe you? Like, this is rude, but like, how much money do I owe you?" And he's like, "No, no, this is war. This is free. You don't owe me anything." And I was like, "Wait, so you're just doing this like out of the goodness of your heart? Like, what's your background?" Like, started asking curious questions. He's like, "Oh yeah, me and my friends were just like, we're trying to help." So my girlfriend and I had stayed in touch with him after he got her 2 friends out, and leaving voice memos on WhatsApp. And something in his voice said to me, you know, I need help. Like, it was probably, another 7 days had gone by. I actually, funny enough, went to Iraq in the Middle East for work. And so I was in
Oh,
Iraq.
everyone's doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, Kurdistan's a gorgeous place. Everyone should visit. It's going to be a hot resort destination one day. I swear to God. Wonderful people. And so I called my girlfriend from Iraq, and I was like, "Listen, something in this kid's voice just says, like, go fly to the other side of the world, find this guy, and see if we can help him." That was just the gist I was getting. And at that point, I'd been following the war, obviously, very closely. I called Nikolai and I said, "Hey, if I came to the other side of the world to find you, what could I bring you?" And he said, "I need a bulletproof vest and a helmet." And I was like, "Okay, I'll get that." And he's like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, I'm sure I can, I live in America. We like guns and stuff like that. So I'm sure I can find something. Um, and so I called my girlfriend and said, hey, what about this? Like, why don't we go fly to the other side of the world and find this kid? Give him a bulletproof vest and a helmet. I'm sure there's like a refugee center that we can work at and like sweep floors and you can help people. And, we'll make this like a 10-day trip and we'll figure it out from there. She's like, yeah, all right, I'll pack. And I'll take 2 weeks off work. I was like, great. So I called a buddy of mine who, when I want to do dumb and dangerous things, I generally run him by him. He's a friend of mine, this guy, Kaj Larson. He lives in Los Angeles, and he's a former Navy SEAL and a TV guy and all that stuff. And I said, hey, listen, here's an idea. I'm going to go to Poland and maybe Ukraine for like 10 days and help out. Here's the story of this kid, Nikolai. And this is Wednesday, and I'm calling from in the middle of the night from Iraq. And he's in Los Angeles. And he's like, I'll pack my stuff. I'll be at your house on Saturday. When you get there, we'll fly to Poland on Monday. And, they'll give us a couple days to like prep gear. I'm like, great. I just ordered a ton of medical equipment, like military grade medical equipment that I found on Amazon, because that was what a lot of these folks that we had connected with through Mikolai were asking for.
Sure.
And so then I started Googling like bulletproof vests in South Florida.
This could get you in trouble, by the way.
Yeah, no, totally. So I won't tell you that I found some nice people and Kaj ended up having to buy them with his military ID. So we got those. I filled out all the forms for, they were personal humanitarian use. And we packed up all of our bags and we're like, okay, Irina speaks the language. I'm good at using the phone and Googling things. Kaj is our resident dumb and dangerous expert. And we're going to find this kid, Mikolai. And I get called another buddy who's climbed Everest twice and had climbed K2 twice. And I was like, well, this guy's good at figuring out complicated things. So he's like, listen, I'll meet you over there. I want to go help out and we'll go.
The difference between you and I don't have a single friend if I call.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll meet you there.
When you've been in the business of dumb and dangerous for a long time, we all tend to gravitate towards each other.
But you're also the only ones who survived.
Yeah, generally speaking, yes. So
you take off for Poland.
we take off for Poland with literally no place to stay, no plan other than to go find this kid Nikolai. He's like, well, listen, I'm running this mission in Ukraine to get some people, and he's like, when do you think you're gonna be on the border? I'm like, well, I think we'll be there tomorrow night. He's like, all right, well, when you get close to the border, call me and I'll try and find you. I'm like, great. We flew into Krakow and we get there, and thank God Polish customs let us through with all of our medical gear and our Kevlar vests. And they were great. And we rented a car. We found a van at Enterprise, and they were like, do not drive this car in Ukraine. You are buying the extra insurance, and whatever you do, don't drive this car in Ukraine. You're like, understood. So we just started driving east from Krakow to the border to this town called Medica, where literally millions of people were streaming across. So I was like, all right, this could be, fairly interesting. And we get there, and it's like a lot of military presence, a lot of police presence, and it's freezing cold, and it's at night. And so we park and we leave my girlfriend with the car, and me and my buddy David Roski, who came to meet us, where we go and we walk to the border. And funny enough, right across the border, there's a parking lot and a grocery store. And I texted Nikolai, I'm like, I'm in the grocery store parking lot. He's like, I'll be there in 15 minutes. I'm like, all right, I'm the tall, very large American with a Yankees hat on and a black Patagonia jacket. He's like, yeah, you won't be hard to spot. I'm like, okay, great. So we meet this kid. He walks up. He's like, are you John? I'm like, are you Nikolai? He's like, yeah. He's like, nice to meet you. He's like, I cannot believe you decided to fly to the other side of the world to meet me. I'm like, yeah, man, you sure. Why wouldn't I? I've got your vest and helmet in the car. So we go, we give him the vest and the helmet, and he's like, well, you guys hungry? I'm like, yeah. So we ended up at this back alley pizza place in Przemysl, Poland, in the eastern, the most populous town in eastern Poland.
How was the pizza?
Pretty decent, actually. So funny enough, we're all sitting around and we're all kind of all right, we're talking to this kid, and so I'm like, I'll just have a water. And my buddy's like, I'll have a tea, and he's like, yeah, I'll have a beer, a big one. We're like, yeah, we'll take 4 of those. So and we order some pizzas. And Mikolai is this former Polish model who finished third on Poland's Top Model. So like, you don't really think of like male Polish model and like doing dumb and dangerous to save people in Ukraine, but turns out that's the
Here he
deal.
is. Huh?
Yeah, and his girlfriend, we got to meet his girlfriend, who came and met us as well, who was lovely.
Now, Irina is with you at this point?
Yeah, Irina was with me. So our little band of crazies was like Irina, me, my buddy Kaj, um, and my buddy David Roski. So there's four of us at this point, and Nikolai and his girlfriend. And so Nikolai tells us the story of the last like 2 weeks of his life as war breaks out, and it's mind blowing, like of where he's been and getting people out and getting aid in, and like what the international community is doing and how NGOs are showing
And
up.
what's it like around you? Is it chaos with all these refugees and military?
No, the Polish, I have to give it to the Polish. They got extreme, and it was Polish business. It wasn't his Polish government, right? Like the Tesco refugee center was a former like Best Buy electronics store, and the guy who owned it was like bought beds, brought in water trucks, like paid for it all out of pockets, and he called his buddies, and they all just started working like 60 Polish businesses to take refugees in. And they were there. So the town of Przemysl is like 60,000 people. By the time we got there 2 weeks in, 10,000 residents had taken in families, and all of the refugees streaming across were women and kids or old people.
I told you I was chatting with Sebastian this morning, and he said, being a native of Poland and still having family there, he said pretty much every Polish family that he speaks with has taken in a refugee, two or three or four.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's 100% the case. And so,
Amazing, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, and like, so we ended up, because we couldn't find a hotel because all the journalists had taken up, and big NGOs had taken up hotels. We randomly, through like through a friend in the States, had connected with someone's parents who took us into their house. So like, we're staying with this couple in their 70s who like are hosting us and treating us like their grandchildren. And they're like, gave us run of their house, which was great because it was right on the border, so we could run operations out of there. So yeah, it was like literally on a Saturday where they have 10,000 refugees coming through a center. They had to turn volunteers away because so many people from the towns or nearby or internationally would show up just to help.
That's an amazing, amazing story. So you connected with Nikolai and his girlfriend. There's this six of you now. He's continuing his operations, and you say, "How else can we help?"
Yeah, so we chatted to him and we're like, listen, like what can we do to help you? Like if we were going to, he's like, listen, the big NGOs are going to show up and help people, like, be clothed, fed, have a place to stay. What needs to happen now is like people who are in very dangerous areas that are getting shelled. Like we need to get them out, and we need to get non-lethal military aid to them: vests, helmets, night vision goggles, medical kits, things of that nature, food. He's like, that's kind of where I'm now focused, and if you guys want to work with me, like I'll happily do that. And we were like, okay, like we can go. And we spent a week at the refugee center, like, Irina, because she spoke the language, would help folks get to other parts of Europe. We were handing out small amounts of cash. We're literally mopping floors, we're serving food, doing those things. But it was, once the big NGOs showed up, like there was staffing for that. So we're like, hey, what are these people not doing? And NGOs aren't really geared in today's day and age to like work in a war effort. They're geared towards a crisis, generally of a natural disaster. So we're like, all right, well, we're not an NGO. We don't have a board. Like we raised a bunch of nonprofit money, and we can stay within thank God we had a lawyer with us. We can stay within the confines of US law and Polish and Ukrainian law, but like we can go out and figure out how to purchase, body armor, helmets, of individual first aid kits, food, things of that nature that would help troops. So we just started doing that. And Nikolai was great. He had a little crew of his buddies that we made friends with. So it was like their crew and our crew got together. We helped them buy a Ford F-150.
Now,
They have,
obviously, Nikolai spoke English. Did his other
yeah,
friends and his girlfriend all speak English too?
yeah, everyone speaks English, Polish, some of them speak Ukrainian, some speak Russian. So like we could, all of our whole crew spoke English.
Yep.
So we're like, all right, let's prioritize like getting what gear we can get. Let's prioritize where we're going. Let's get intelligence on where Russian troop movements are so that we don't die.
And what
Right.
kind of intelligence, quote unquote, was available just on the internet?
Yeah. So the wonderful thing about the internet is there are a lot of people who have too much time on their hands. And so, there's a lot of like open source intelligence, like from Twitter to Reddit to various other like services that you can go out and basically be like, all right, well, somebody is tracking, like Flight Radar 24 would track like where Russian jets were. Like, all right, well, if that's a Russian MiG, it's likely got this much flight time. They're probably going to bomb this, et cetera, et cetera. So you could, and then like you could start working the phones and be like, all right, are these roads open? Where are checkpoints? Things of that nature. Um, and so then you're like, all right, well, we kind of, it's a big game of hide and go seek, and we got to make sure we know where they are, and so they don't know where we are. And we left a lot of that stuff to Kaj, right, who's served in the military, things of that nature, to do like planning, movements, security, all that fun things. And it was like me kind of playing camp counselor of like, all right, when do people need to sleep, eat, what gear can we procure, budget, what do we do with people if we rescue them, like taking orders from folks, things of that nature. So we kind of, it's almost like a startup, right? You're like, all right, I've got customers and orders. I can match those orders with, supplies or product that I have. And what do they need? Do they need transportation? Do they need equipment? Do they need medical stuff? So we ran 5 pretty serious missions deep inside Ukraine, like all the way to Kyiv while it was under siege, and rescued like 34 people. We got out of really serious fighting areas. We did a lot of assisting folks that we just didn't take credit for. It was like, hey, how do we help people get from A to B? Or if they needed a couple $100, to support something, we do that. And, it was long days. You work like 18 hours a day, trying to help people or trying to procure stuff or trying to find out information. So we're just doing that. And yeah, we did everything from like we evacuated a wounded American, which was a whole other story of chaos and crazy, who'd been shot by a Russian that he had volunteered to go fight in the Foreign Legion and had been shot. So we got him out. We helped sponsor tactical combat casualty care training for a territorial defense unit.
It was still cold then. This was in March, right? March.
Yeah, it's freezing. It was freezing. So,
and you were dressed appropriately. You had a good gear.
Yeah, we had good gear. So ever like kind of like, hey, boots, Patagonia jackets. You're outside most of the day and you're running, like you're moving around a lot. So.
And what was the weather like? Was it gray? Was it snowy?
No, well, some days it snowed like a couple days, but mainly it was like fairly sunny but cold.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, so and I'm like, okay, in every car that we're running, like the things that are going to get you killed are a car accident, right? So hey, medical gear in every car, water in every car, because people tend to not hydrate themselves when they're running around doing things every day, and
Yep.
that can create problems. Make sure people's cell phone batteries are charged so I can get in touch with you, so I know where you are. Do you have cash on you? Like it was like I was a parent.
And were you concerned that the electricity or the internet could go out at any time?
Not so much like when we were inside Ukraine, definitely. Like there was we had a couple of blackouts or like rolling blackouts, but nothing crazy. Like when we were in Lviv, they bombed a power station. So we assumed that the power was going to go out. So like, all right, extra batteries for cell phones, and like, we didn't need flashlights, but if you needed them to have batteries for those. So you just have to think through like, okay, do I have, they didn't do this, but if they bomb a water facility, right? Do you want to have bottled water so that, God forbid, it takes a while to get drinking water? You've got it, but that didn't happen, even though we thought about it.
So
Um,
you're procuring supplies, you're arranging for these mini caravans, going into areas, distributing the materials, connecting with, was there any organization on the ground that you got there? Yes, we need this here, this here.
no, so the two organizations that we ran into that we made friends with and that we absolutely loved, are, and they seem to show up as fast as we did, and or Spirit of America, which is a US NGO that does work right alongside the US military. So we connected with them, and it was two girls our age who were moving planefuls of aid
Wow.
to Ukrainians, and they were hysterical, and they've become really good friends. So they were like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" I'm like, "Well, we're doing this," and they're like, "Oh, cool." So we worked with them, and they were a blast to work with, and were very, very good at their jobs and are continuing that work, right? And the amount of stuff that they're moving, with such a small team is incredible. Started by the Spirit of America was started by a former entrepreneur who's very successful, who ended up coming to visit us in Ukraine, which was great. And then the other organization is Jose Andres' organization, World Central Kitchen.
Amazing what they do, huh?
Unreal. It's funny, like I can deal with all the like the two things I can't deal with, or like have an emotionally hard time with, is like watching their operation, like of them serve people food, kills me for some reason. And like kids at refugee centers, like I was never so happy as to for two things. One is that I couldn't speak the language, so I couldn't really understand the gravity of the horror that was happening around me, but my girlfriend could. And then which she's way better at dealing with than me. And then like watching World Central Kitchen and people like sit and eat for some reason like just kills me. So I love those guys at WCK, and we did a lot to get them some help. Um, and we saw their operations like deep inside Ukraine, of the things that they were doing. My girlfriend actually 2 nights ago just got back from Kiev and was up in Irpin and Bucha seeing their work. And they're unbelievable organization. So um,
So you do this for 35 days,
yeah,
then you come back to civilization, you're a world of experiences, emotions, learning, contextualizing what we're seeing on the news. It seems like America is tiring of this war. It's been 100
yes.
days. Oh, that's over. What do you say?
I can assure you it's not. Um, I didn't go this second trip, but my girlfriend spent a week in Kiev leading a delegation, and so leading and assisting a delegation to do some food security work. Couple things. One, from like a kinetic warfare standpoint, the Donbass where she's from, like each side's losing a couple hundred people a day. I mean, they're battling.
And it must be, with all the bombardment, it must be nearly leveled now.
Yeah, so like the Russians are indiscriminate shooters. Like they just roll up to a place and like they don't do directed fire. They just drop shells everywhere.
Level.
And they level everything. So they kill everybody, breathing, or try to. And that's their mode of warfare is terror. And so, but Ukraine is the size of Texas, so there's still a lot of stuff to blow up, unfortunately. And the Ukrainians are like, listen, we're going to put up a fight, and the United States and the rest of the Western world are throwing weapons and other resources at the situation, but not with overwhelming fire superiority, um, which means that this war is not going to end anytime soon. Um, I also think that Putin knows that's part of his strategy. That the West will tire. That
I'm afraid that calculation might be right.
yeah, but I would say this, like what people aren't realizing, the smart people, and not, that's a rude thing to say, but like people who are close to the conflict and understand what role Ukraine plays strategically in the world. 76% of the world food program's grain comes from Ukraine. They're, 14 to 16% of wheat comes out of Ukraine every year. Sunflower seed oil.
So is there a pending food crisis in a good chunk of the world?
100 million people in Africa are going to be food insecure in the next 6 to 9 months. That's 10% of Africa. If these folks don't get a wheat harvest off or get the wheat out, and Putin's cut off all ports, the Black Sea port of Odessa, if you can't replace that, right? And you have a situation where you've got Soviet gauge rail in Ukraine and you've got European gauge rail in Poland, so you can't get train cars of grain out. And people are working on this, both private sector, government, things of that nature, but there's going to be a lot of issues with it. And so Ukraine plays this unique role. Like the week before, when I was in northern Iraq, I'm sitting with this guy who's a provincial governor. He goes, I'm in deep trouble. I'm like, why? He's like, all my grain that feeds people up here and makes food products is from Ukraine. So I got to go run around the world and find that.
So now tell me, when you're in Kyiv,
Yeah.
which I still have a hard time, I have to be deliberate about thinking about saying Kyiv, not Kiev, because that's what I grew up hearing. Does it feel fairly normal? Are people going to work? Are ambulances responding to
Yeah.
heart attack victims? Are restaurants open? What does it feel like in Kyiv?
Yeah, I mean, so Ukrainians, like the Poles, and are extremely resilient people. What was really like just messed with your mind when I first went into Ukraine, right? I went into the city of Lviv, and we're coming from the border, right, where you're seeing people in very desperate circumstances, like folks who had come from Mariupol and Kharkiv and these places where they were just crushed, right? Their homes were burned down or bombed. So it's a lot of suffering and desperation that's around you. And, you see these amazing moments of humanity, but also, just horror. And people's lives affected in ways that they are probably not going to understand for a long period of time. And then we go into Lviv, right, which is like 2 hours east of there, and it's the most largest Western city in Ukraine. And we get there, and aside from the checkpoints and like dudes with guns, which at that point didn't really bother us, you see like little kids out in the park, and like people are eating ice cream, and like restaurants and bars are open, and you're like, and then air raid sirens will go off and a missile will land, and you're like, okay. So that really twisted up your brain a bunch. And so yeah, you can run around and feel safe, and then all of a sudden, like, you're not. So you have to be aware of that and vigilant about it. But the Ukrainians are like, well, we can get busy living or get busy dying, and I think we're just going to get busy living because there's nothing else we can do except try and fight these folks to get them off of our land. And in the meantime, we're going to try and live life, because if we don't, our economy is going to fail, and they might not beat us militarily, but they'll decimate us economically. So,
Now, your buddy Nikolai,
yeah.
he had one request of you.
Yes.
He said, what else can we do because you're feeling guilty about leaving? It's been an interesting adventure, an experiment. You feel good about what you've done, but it's a Band-Aid on an elephant there. He said, what can I do to help you? And he asked for what?
Yeah, so he asked so we ended up helping him we were supposed to be there for 10 days. We stayed for 35, mainly to help him and his friends. And we got him a bulletproof vest and a helmet, and I almost killed him because he gave it away to a soldier. But he's like, he needed it more than me. So we kept finding him bulletproof vests and helmets, and he kept giving them away. And I told him I was going to duct tape to him. I was like, I'm going to duct tape this to you. And he, when we left him, we still continued to help him. And I talked to him every day.
And what's he driving now?
He was driving a Ford F-150. And
I love that.
Yeah. Like Dukes of Hazzard style, only 23-year-old kids. They like drove it over a bombed out bridge and like jumped the bridge with it. I'm still waiting for video on that, but I know they did it.
But you guys got him that Ford F-150, no?
Yeah, we did. We bought about half that Ford F-150, spray painted it black, put some tags on it. But yeah, so he, he broke his foot, and then he got his arm was damaged. So he's recovering from his wounds because he was deep in the Donbass, helping out. And this kid went for 90 days straight. Just, I mean, I don't know. There's over 500 people that are still breathing because of him. And I can't even calculate the tons of equipment and gear that he has moved and the people that he has helped.
Amazing. 23 years old,
Yeah.
former model. Well, former only because there's a war going on.
Yeah.
And you guys get connected, and he takes your call online, via the internet. And oh yeah, you're a friend of his. Okay, good. It's an amazing story, John. And last Wednesday, I attended. Jeff Sonnenfeld is a friend, and he's the associate dean of the Yale School of Management, professor there, and he runs a program called the Yale CEO Summit. And he did it last Wednesday, and he did it at the New York City Library on Fifth Avenue and 42nd Street.
Love that place.
Beautiful room downstairs there. I've been to weddings there too, but he runs a CEO forum. There's about 100, 120 of us there. And he says, I have a surprise guest to kick off our conference. And he pushes a button, and who's on this big screen in front of us?
Zelensky.
President Zelensky. Amazing. And
Yeah.
so he made brief remarks, and then he stood for an hour with us just doing Q&A. And in answer to the question, what can we as individuals do for you? And his response was, my people, 12 million now and counting, have been displaced and are scattered all over the world, particularly in Europe, Poland, as you mentioned, Slovakia, everywhere. And he said, my people need help. They need food. They need a shelter. They need work opportunities when they can get them. They need their kids to have schooling and healthcare. And then they need help getting home after we win this war, because they all want to come back home.
That is true.
And it's very emotional to hear him say this. And his first concern was, and then the second piece of that was, and we, not just Ukraine, but we, the Western world, has to win this war. We cannot lose.
Yes.
We cannot win without more ammunition.
Yeah.
We need your help. We need you not to forget that we're fighting this war for all of us every day.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say too, he's, having literally looked these people in the face, there's a couple things that I'm going home when this is over. I'm going to rebuild my country. And the concern wasn't like, where can I get a meal? The concern wasn't like, where can I find a bed? It was, where do I find a job? I'm willing to work because my husband, my brother, my son is fighting, and I need to be able to be the breadwinner. So that was that's true. And I will tell you an interesting story. So we made a cannonball run pretty deep, just my girlfriend and I, right? Into Ukraine to go pick somebody up who we delivered her to a meeting with the US government. And she does non-lethal aid. And, so my girlfriend and her become friends, and they went to the same university, different in age. And she's like, it's interesting. I think a lot of people in the government were going to run for their lives and get the hell out of here. And they're educated. People work for the government are educated and all those things. But he stayed, and we didn't think he was going to. All of our ministers stayed, and everybody stayed. And I think both Russia and the United States were like, yeah, this guy's going to run for his life. Because frankly, he should have. But he was like, no, this is my people, my land,
Amazing that we, and in my case, children and grandchildren, are witnessing an amazing act of bravery and leadership like few others we've seen in the world that's been so public like this. Just extraordinary. We all of us in the room last Wednesday when he appeared on the screen, literally we all had goosebumps to realize that we could be, thanks to technology, having a conversation with this newly minted world hero for freedom and for democracy and for human rights and human suffering. Just an extraordinary feeling for us. And I can't imagine what a feeling it is for you and Irina and your two buddies and your friend Nikolai, who you got so close with. Tell us what it's like now. You're back a couple of months now.
Yeah, it was
Feel like you're staying in touch. Your new friends from Spirit of America, you're staying in touch with them.
Yeah, the Spirit of American folks we're still in touch with. They're fantastic organization, and they're just doing great work. So yeah, I still talk to them a bunch. The work continues. It's frustrating to be. It was like really weird. Like we landed. We live in Miami Beach. It's pretty nice, and like we'd seen a lot and done a lot in 35 days, and we were exhausted. So like to come home and sit at your pool was really weird. Um,
Knowing what's going on just across the pond.
yeah, and like, and I'm sort of kind of getting over this, but not really. It's like people be like, "Oh, well, we'll have a meeting tomorrow," and you're like, "Yeah." The number of people I know that are going to be dead by the time I have that meeting is frustrating because I was very close to that. And so, yeah, we're still working on it. Like my girlfriend just spent a week there. Met with the foreign minister. Met with a bunch of people from Zelensky's team. And so she's still working on it, and I'm still working on it in the background of trying to raise money and raise awareness, and help folks. My stuff is more focused on like, hey, how do I help individuals? And hers is much more broader and strategic. And that's her mind and her ability. You can do a lot over here, but it's a hell of a lot easier when you're over there. And there's a more urgency to things, obviously. But yeah, the things that you mentioned about we can't forget about these folks, and also like we can't forget about these folks because it matters to us as Americans and as the Western world. Like if we lose this war, there will be serious ramifications for every living breathing American. Like there is no doubt about that.
So let me be unfair and ask you, how do you think this? How do you think the next 100 days goes, and how do you hope it goes?
I mean, I'm 30,000 plus pages into reading about Vladimir Putin over the last 2 decades, and geopolitics is like I'm a nerd and it's a hobby of mine. I don't think he's played all his cards. I think he's very smart in the sense of he's waiting us out, and he can march 20,000 people to their death, and Russians don't care.
A different sense of the value of life in
Correct.
the
Yeah.
East there. I mean, these
Yes.
people, I heard the other day from a smart friend of mine is if you look at all the casualties suffered in World War II, all of the casualties, 500,000 for the U.S., uh, and the numbers you'd hear from UK and France, and 90% of all of the casualties of World War II were suffered by Russians.
27 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
27 million. Oh, and most of them were Ukrainians. Like,
Is that right?
yeah, huge. I mean, the Nazis went across Belarus and Ukraine and then back.
Yep.
And so they, I think the next,
That's an ingredient that goes into attitudes about humanity, its value, et cetera. And as you say, it's a it's a different mindset.
correct. Yeah. And I think that, listen, like the world, we're coming to an inflection point, right? In the next 6 months, the next, probably the preview of that will be the next 100 days because a whole hell of a lot of people around the world are going to starve. And what happens when people are starving and thirsty? They pick up guns and they shoot other people for their resources. It's pretty simple. It's been happening since the dawn of time. So winning this war will have great effects not only for the wonderful people of Ukraine who are trying to live their lives without being killed, and live in freedom, but like the rest of the world too, particularly that of Africa, the Europeans, like things of that nature. And so what's frustrating, like, listen, the United States, we've done a lot. I got to see a ton of it up close and personal, but and I know that there's escalation theory and escalate to de-escalate, and how we've studied the Russians and they've studied us over the last 70 some years. And I would advocate for giving the Ukrainians superior firepower. Like they are matching the Russians right now with firepower and what we've sent in this military aid package. But like we need to make sure that their economy doesn't collapse, that their wheat harvest gets out of the country and sold on the international markets.
Well, that's the amazing thing is I'm thinking this war's going on in their country. Somebody is driving a cab in Kiev and there's a man and a woman in their late 60s who are tending to their wheat farm somewhere in between Donbass and Kyiv, hoping that they'll make the harvest, hoping that they can get it out of the country, get paid for it, so they can plant next year's crop. All these planes and bombs are going overhead.
I've met those people. Like, I've stood in their farm fields. Like, yeah,
Remarkable.
that's it. That's happening.
John, from the time I met you 3 years ago until today, I just grow in my admiration and respect for you. And this adventure that you and Irina and your two buddies went on, thanks for sharing it with us. It's I can't wait to share this with my kids and my grandkids to show that there are interesting, crazy, fun, thoughtful, caring people like you, John, who, and I know other things that you've done, go out of your way to bring your skills to the table for things you believe in. And it's just an amazing story, and it helps us have a deeper understanding of what's going on because you bring your firsthand emotional and physical account of what you saw, what you experienced to the table for us to consume and think about and develop a point of view about how important the consequences of this conflict are for all of us. Not for just the obvious, the refugees, the countries they've impacted, and for the Ukrainians themselves. So John, thanks for being such a good guy, such a smart guy, and such a thoughtful, giving guy, because I know I was a bit uncomfortable on the beach in Naples, Florida, because it was cool one day while you were over there freezing your ass off.
Yeah.
In that Ukrainian farm field with that older couple who were farming that land.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, Jim, and your interest and the friendship that you've given me for the last 3 years, and I will continue. So thank you.
All right, buddy. You be well. Say hello to Irina first.
Will do. Talk soon.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim1800Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Celebrations Chatter. You can join our community by reaching out at chatter@celebrations.com. And while you're at it, tell us what topics you'd like us to explore here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to share it forward.